Hey guys, welcome back to the Speaker's Edge podcast, the podcast specifically designed to help you to learn from some of the world's very best speakers and communicators so that you can learn to master your message, inspire your audience every single time you speak. I'm your host for this podcast, Roddy Galbraith, and I'm thrilled you've chosen to join us in this episode. In the last episode, we were talking to John Maxwell. We had a masterclass in communicating and connecting specifically. In this episode, I have another very special guest for you, cellular biologist, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I've personally found his work specifically on the physiology of fear incredibly helpful for me personally, and also sharing that same information in the way that he explains it has been very useful for me to help many people with their fear of speaking as well. Now, I've got hours and hours of the interview. I just want to share a short part of it with you so that we can take a dive into fear and the effects it has on the body, and we'll come back to some of the other perhaps deeper elements of dealing with fear in later episodes. But before we get into that, don't forget to download the companion resources. Simply go to maxwellleadership.com/the Speaker's Edge, and we would love it if you rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Okay, so let's dive into this episode then. This show is all about learning from many different experts. So some of the great speakers and communicators in the world. As I said, we had John Maxwell giving us a masterclass on the last episode, and there's many other great speakers and communicators to come. Today's expert, though, Dr. Bruce Lipton, he is a great speaker, but it's his description of fear that's just been so helpful to me. And I think if you've been struggling with fear of speaking, or any fear actually, then the way that he kind of demystifies what's going on in the body is going to be incredibly helpful for you too. Make sure you take plenty of notes. Here's Bruce. Enjoy. And I'm here with now my good friend, Bruce Lipton. How are you, Bruce?
I am happy to be here with you so much, Roddy. I so appreciate what you guys are doing, and makes me feel good to be right next to you.
It makes me feel good to be with you as well. We were saying just before we started filming, I'm a big fan of Bruce's, and Susan was telling him about how we really dug into your work years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago when the book first came out.
It's been a while ago now, yes.
Yeah, great stuff, really great stuff. And so I wanted to dig now today with you into fear, because my lane within the John Maxwell team is...
Oh, you scared me already?
I'm here, don't worry.
Okay.
My lane is speaking, and a lot of people are scared of speaking. And I know, fear is fear. So if we talk about fear generally, we'll be able to apply it to speaking as well.
Yeah. Well, fear has so many ramifications. One of the things that it really results in is stress. That's the expression of it, okay? Yeah. And we used to think, all kinds of genes were responsible for disease and all that. And it turns out less than 10%, maybe just 1% of diseases and illness are connected to genes.
Right.
And over 90% is due to stress. So the stress of not being able to talk in public is actually very, debilitating on the system. And there's a very important reason why. And the answer is this. That there are two postures that a human can have in life. One is to be in growth, and the other is to be in protection. And what's really important about this is you have to look at it this way. If a stimulus is offering growth, you move to the stimulus. And you move open, because growth means assimilation. Take something in, whatever it is. If it's another person's energy or a meal or whatever it is, you take it in. Okay.
Even on a cellular level, right down to
at the very cellular level, because whatever a growth is, it enhances the vitality of the cells. So the cells are taking in information. Okay.
Right.
In contrast, if some stimulus is threatening, you don't go to it. You go away from it.
And close off, presumably.
And you close off.
Right.
So I say, now, what's the difference? Growth, go to a stimulus being open. Protection is go away from a stimulus and be closed. And guess what? You can't be in growth and in protection at exactly the same time. They're mutually exclusive.
Right.
Okay? And then it turns out that the whole idea of the stress system was designed a long time ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, 1 million years ago. And I say basically it was designed for us as humans to run away from that proverbial saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
And I say, well, how much of the time were we in stress? I say, well, if the tiger coming and chasing you, if you get away,
Otherwise,
you're in stress for 10 or 15 minutes,
and then that's it.
And then you escape. Okay,
till you see another one.
And then the stress is over.
Right.
Okay. the problem is today's world, stress is not limited to a short little run.
Right.
Stress is 24/7, 365. And the significance is this: the switch from growth to protection shuts down some very vital functions to keep us healthy and alive. And there's a reason why we switch behaviors, and simply this: blood carries energy.
Right.
Okay? And if I say, well, if I'm running away from a saber-toothed tiger, then where the heck do I want my blood? I say, well, your arms and legs.
Right.
Okay? I say, well, blood is preferentially distributed. In growth, when we're in growth, the blood is primarily in the gut, the viscera, because these are all the organs that maintain the health of the system, keep it running right, rebuilding it, providing all the things that we need. And I say, yeah, but at the moment of stress, I don't want the blood in the stomach. I want the blood in my arms and legs.
Right.
So the stress hormones, the first thing they do is squeeze the blood vessels shut in the gut. And when people are afraid, frequently they feel butterflies in the stomach.
Right.
That's actually the blood vessels squeezing. You can feel it's fluttering. It's fluttering.
Right.
And when those blood vessels are squeezed, then it forces the blood to the arms and legs. So now I can use the energy for running.
So you haven't got enough blood for everything, so it's choosing where it's going. It's choosing
Absolutely.
to go to the arms and legs so you can escape.
It's an efficiency system, a total efficiency. But the problem is this: well, then it says, well, while I'm in stress, I'm not using my organs of safety, management, health, taking care of me. They're on hold.
Right.
Because there's no blood for them right now.
Right.
Okay. And this is where illness starts, because, as I said, when in the old days, if it was just to run away from the tiger, 15 minutes, boom, you go back into growth again. But we have so inhibited growth because there's so much stress on the planet that the healthcare crisis that the world is facing right now, 90% or more is actually just due to the stress.
Right.
Because you're debilitating yourself.
So the immune system is one of the things then affected.
Oh, okay. That's even a separate situation. Okay, yeah. For this reason, you ready? The immune system uses a lot of energy.
Right.
It's protection for the inside. And it uses so much energy that if you talk to people who are sick and they say, oh, I can hardly get out of bed, I have no energy, and I go, because the immune system uses tremendous quantities. So I say, well, wait a second, now let's put the situation here. I'm suffering from a bacterial infection. Could even have a bad case of diarrhea coming, in my immune system. But then I'm being chased by that tiger.
Right.
Now the question is this, you're going to move the energy where it's necessary.
Do you want to deal with the bacteria or get away from the light?
Well, that's the point,
Yeah.
and the idea is the hell with the bacteria, because the tiger catches you, then the bacteria is not your problem anymore. And so guess what? Stress hormones shut down the immune system again to conserve energy. And it's so valuable at doing that medical doctors therapeutically use stress hormones when they want to transplant an organ into a recipient, because you don't want the recipient's immune system to immediately reject the foreign organ. Right. So before they do the transplant, they give them the stress hormones to do what? Shut off the immune system. Right. Well, that's how valuable it is, or how functional it is in controlling that immune system. So now I say a person's facing stress. I go, well, now what? Well, you shut off the growth and the maintenance of the system, number one. Number two, you shut down the immune system because I can't afford to spend the energy there. And then you start to realize why there's so much sickness and illness related to this high level of stress. And in schools, for example, when it comes to exam time, that's when the students really start to get sick. They get all stressed out trying to study, the exams coming and all this stuff.
Because of the prolonged
chronic secretion of stress.
Right.
So this is why up to 90% of our health is compromised with continuous stress that we're experiencing here.
Right. So in the olden days, if you like, way back, then it would be a temporary threat which we'd experience and we'd deal with it or not, and then we'd go back to relaxing and the system would come back and you'd move back into growth. And
it was just a momentary, if you think of it, it's a momentary halting of the operation, and then it'll pick it right back up as soon as you're out. But getting out of stress today is not an easy problem.
Credit card debt.
Add it up.
Yeah, the mortgage. Yeah. Spouses having an affair. Or...
Now, I have to add one last thing, and I call this one adding insult to injury.
Right.
Meaning what? You already are stressed. That's an injury coming, okay? The insult is this. You have two parts of the mind. You have the conscious, creative mind, the one connected to your personal identity. It's very creative, conscious mind, which is just behind your forebrain, your forehead right here. It's called prefrontal cortex inside the brain.
Okay.
And what happens is this, is that we have that creative part, but the rest of the subconscious brain is the part that controls almost the whole apparatus called the body.
Right.
And it's 1,000,000 times more powerful, the subconscious than the conscious. And the significance is this. If you're running from that tiger, or let's just say you're in a car and it's going out of control, the conscious brain is a real slow functioning brain.
Right.
Subconscious brain is instantaneous.
Right.
So, I try to suggest, well, what if a car is going out of control and I stay in my conscious mind, it'll go, I'll just be paralyzed. I'd be paralyzed, right?
Yeah.
But the moment, remember I told you that the stress hormones squeeze the blood vessels in the gut?
Yeah.
The same stress hormones squeeze the blood vessels in the forebrain, consciousness.
And move it away from...
And the blood then shoots to the hindbrain because that's where reaction reflex behavior, reaction reflex, not thinking, not consciousness, it's respond.
Right.
Okay? So the idea is this. When you're in a stressful situation, not only you squeeze the blood vessels in the gut, but you squeeze the blood vessels in the forebrain, consciousness, shuts down consciousness, immediately pushes the energy to the hindbrain so I can make a reaction. I go, well, you become less intelligent.
So you can't think as clearly or
there
as
is no
as
thinking.
you used to.
There is no thinking.
Do you know, well, I was driving, I bought a new car, and Susan and I were driving along the road, and out of nowhere a car came towards me, and I turned up onto the path, the sidewalk, and kind of went along a little bit and went back, and Susan said, "Oh my goodness, you did that really quickly." And I said, "I didn't do it. That kind of happened on its own." Do you remember that, Susan? and maybe that's what you're talking about. So
it's 100%
a reflexive action.
100% that. So then I say, okay, so what is the consequence of stress? I say 3 things. 1, shuts down the growth and maintenance of the body. 2, shuts down the immune system. And 3, shuts down consciousness, which is where you control.
Right.
Because hindbrain reflex is not control. It's stimulus response, no thinking involved. Yeah. So if you put a person under stress, they lose the ability to communicate at that moment.
And well, going back to speaking, a lot of people experience that when they go blank, or
they go
what do I do if I freeze?
Right, because at that point, try and think when your thinking brain, conscious brain is the blood vessels are squeezed shut.
Right.
There's no energy in there.
Right.
So you stand in front of the audience, you look around, the fear hits, and the next thing, guess what? Butterflies in the stomach.
Right. You want to go to the loo.
Go through the whole thing, but try and think of something in that state, and thinking is suppressed. You know it, but you just can't get the words out because you're not operating from the conscious mind. You're operating from the reflex mind.
So how long does that last in that situation then? Does it stay with you while you're stressed, or while you're?
It stays as long as the stimulus that provoked the stress is still present.
Right.
So if you stand up in front of the audience and you have fear of talking, it's very difficult for a person. It's like to make the audience invisible. Oh, it's not there. It's like, okay, you can play the game and work on it. People try to put another picture in your head instead of the audience, put something else in there.
Right.
But as long as the stimulus that provokes the stress is present, you will then unconsciously be operating from that system.
So what about your habitual mind? Would that come under? So if you've learned something habitually, so something, could you be able to say a nursery rhyme, for example, in that situation that you've known for years? But presumably that would be more accessible then, would it?
Absolutely, because that's the part of the brain you're in, and it doesn't need thinking because that's just the subconscious mind is like a hard drive of a computer. It's got programs in it, and as long as you push, open the program, then you can play the program. But there's no thinking in a program. Programs are automatic. Just push the button and let it play automatically.
Right. I always tell people with speaking that the fear, mainly you experience it before you get there, before you're speaking, and when you first start speaking. So if you know your introduction very well, then there's a comfort that comes from, operating without that thinking. Yeah,
and it's interesting because after how many years I've been lecturing, 35 years, before I get going, when I first get on the stage, there's this moment where I always say, oh, it's still me, I'm still here, and I'm looking at this, I'm still here, and I get my words going. But then there's a point where it's really beautiful because I switch into like an automatic.
Right.
After I just start talking and I get going. And then it's just automatic.
Right.
But it's always that first few minutes of the thing. I'm still here. I'm still here. Come on, let's go. And then it will start to work.
So the three things then: you stop digesting your food, you stop fighting off bacteria, and you can't think. That's the effects of stress.
It's more than just digesting the food. It does all the organs in this system are maintenance of the body at every different level, filtering things out of the blood or whatever it's doing, breathing, cleaning, doing all these things. So it's maintenance, body maintenance is shut down.
Okay. All right, and what are those stress hormones? Is that cortisol?
Cortisol is the main stress hormone.
Or you don't call it adrenaline here, do you?
Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine is another one of them. There's a whole series of subtle changes with, it's not just like one hormone, boom, but there are subtle changes because there are other hormones that seem to have other effects to coordinate your response.
Oh my goodness, there is so much packed into that short clip, isn't there? And so much that we can relate to, I think, because we've all experienced what he's talking about. We've all experienced butterflies in the stomach. We've all experienced that exam stress, and we've all been tired or exhausted when we've had COVID or flu, haven't we? So it's really relatable, I think, and it really helps us understand that we can deal with this. If we want to be able to stand up and speak in front of a group of people, it's just another skill that we can learn to develop and get good at. So we're going to draw out some of the key parts of the interview, but before we do that, if you're a regular listener to the show, then you've heard me talk about the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team before. If you're interested in developing your speaking, I really think it's worth checking out because we have nearly 60,000 coaches worldwide now in about 168 different countries. If you want to work on your speaking, and I think the Maxwell method of speaking, which is really just 50 plus years of John's very intentional growth as a speaker and a communicator distilled down into a system that anyone can use. Check it out. Just go to maxwellleadership.com/speak, jump on a call with a program advisor, and they'll answer your questions, tell you a bit about the program, and you can see if it's a fit. And it could very well be the best call you've ever made if it is a fit for you. And there's no obligation anyway, so it's a no-brainer in my mind. All right, let's look at some of the key extracts from the video then. There's so much in here, as I said. I want to pick up on those three key effects in the body though. But first of all, he sets it up very neatly, doesn't he, by talking about blood is energy and it's a conservation system within the body. There's not enough blood for everything. And these two key states that he talks about the body being in, either in growth or protection. And when the body's in growth, if there's a growth stimulus, then we tend to move towards that and we move towards it open, even on a cellular level. And if it's a stressful stimulus, then we move away from it and we move closed, again on a cellular level. And the key thing is the body can't be in both growth and protection at the same time. It's one or the other. When the body's in growth, then there's all kinds of maintenance going on in the system, and the blood is typically around the viscera, around the stomach and the internal organs, and all of those maintenance build and rebuild processes are going on. But then when there's a stress, the body responds in 1/10 of a second. The physiology changes so that we're able to deal with the stress. And there's these three key impacts of that in the body. And remember, we can't be in both growth and protection at the same time. So the first big impact that he talked about is the body moves from growth to protection. The blood is moved away from the viscera, away from the stomach to the arms and legs so that we can deal with the stress. So while we're stressed, the blood is not being used for growth. It's not being used for maintenance. All those systems are shut down. And I said, so we're not digesting food anymore then? He said, no, it's much more than that. It's all of the cells in the body are in like the maintenance that is needed just to stay as we are. It takes enormous amounts of energy. There's a lot going on. Those things are put on hold so we can deal with the threat. There's not enough energy for everything. There's not enough blood for everything. So the blood is moved preferentially to the arms and the legs so that we can deal with the threat. So the body maintenance is shut down. The effect of this is it shuts down the maintenance of our bodily functions, and we mobilize all of that energy to deal with the threat. So that's the first thing. The second thing was then, when I mentioned the immune system, he said, oh my goodness, that's a whole nother thing, isn't it? The immune system uses a lot of energy. When we're sick, we know this. If you had COVID, you know this. If you've had flu, you know this. I had COVID, I was in bed for 9 days several years back. Now, if my body is dealing with a virus or a bacterial infection or something, then it makes sense, doesn't it? And a threat on the inside that may kill me in 2 weeks if it's not dealt with, that's what all of that energy is going towards dealing with, trying to fight off that infection. But if a tiger suddenly bursts into the room or the hospital or wherever you are, then you've got a more immediate threat to deal with, because the bacterial infection might kill you in 2 weeks. This tiger's going to eat you in the next 2 seconds if you don't deal with it. So those systems then are shut down so that all of that energy can be used to deal with that pressing threat. And it's the stress hormones that shut down the immune system, the same hormones that constrict the blood vessels of the stomach and the viscera to push the blood out towards the extremities, towards the limbs. The same hormones shut down the immune system. Isn't that interesting? So that we can conserve that energy. And he said that the hormones are so effective at this that doctors will use the hormones to shut down the immune system of transplant patients so that their body doesn't reject the organs or whatever's being transplanted into their bodies. Fascinating, isn't it? So we're tired when we're sick, but we need that energy. We can't afford to be sick if there's a more pressing threat. So for long-term stressors where the immune system is subdued, we can see that this could be a problem. But then the third thing he said was, and this is like he called it adding insult to injury, thinking is shut down. The conscious mind is very slow, it's creative, it's sequential, and so it's great that we can be creative, but it's too slow to deal with tigers or things like that. And so the same hormones that constrict the blood vessels in the stomach constrict the blood vessels in the forebrain to preferentially push the blood to the hindbrain so we can engage in reflexive behaviors that are much more likely to keep us alive. So the conscious mind is too slow for that. We need fast thinking, we need multitasking, and the subconscious mind is able to do many things at the same time, lightning fast, isn't it? If you've ever been stuck behind a learner driver, learning to drive a car, there's lots going on, and they're having to do it all consciously because they don't have the habits to drive the car automatically. So they're thinking about every different step, which is why they're so slow. It's so frustrating to be behind. But it's not long before they can do all of those things automatically because they're internalized and delegated to habit. So that response is the subconscious response, the hindbrain, those reflexive actions are lightning fast compared to the slow, cumbersome thinking. So the same hormones that squeeze the blood vessels in the gut do the same to the forebrain and move the blood to the hindbrain. And I gave the example of when I bought a new Porsche. I was driving very carefully down the road. Me and Susan were going along, and a guy on his phone comes around the corner, and because he was texting, instead of going round the corner, he went straight on. He was heading straight for us as we were coming around the corner. And I bumped up onto the sidewalk, went around him, bumped back down again without hurting my precious tyres, and then carried on going. And Susan said, you reacted to that so quickly. And I said, I remember it specifically, that wasn't me. That happened on its own. And Bruce said, that's exactly what I'm talking about. In a fraction of a second, the reflexive behaviors kick in. Thinking is too slow to deal with the threat, and so the reflexive behaviors take over. So it's incredible, really, when you think about it, isn't it? So all of this, what does it mean for speaking? Well, when you're speaking, if you're stressed, you may find that you can't remember what it is you're going to say. So you go blank, or you worry about going blank, which creates a stressful situation. Or you actually forget what you're going to say, and then you just can't think of anything, and you just want to get out there. You want the ground to open up and swallow you whole. So if we can internalize our message, just like a nursery rhyme that we've known for years would still be available to us in a stressful or a fearful situation, your message or parts of your message can be available to you if they've been internalized, if you've delegated them to habit. It's interesting, isn't it? So practice is so important for many, many different elements of communication, particularly if you want to be at your best no matter what. If you want to be bulletproof in delivery, then you want to experiment with your message, love playing with your message, trying it different ways, practice, discover what's the best way to share my message. And the more you do that, the more you internalize it, then the more you'll be able to do it, even if you're woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, microphone shoved in your hand, you can go out and you can do it because it's a part of you. You don't need to think about it in the same way. So many great messages in here. As I said, it's a part of a much longer interview. We'll come back to it. Today, I just wanted to talk about the physiology of fear because I really feel like it can set you free if you've been struggling with a fear of speaking or stage fright or a fear of forgetting what you're going to say or going blank. So that's it for this week. Don't forget to download our companion resources. Go to maxwellleadership.com/The Speaker's Edge. And you heard John say this in last week's interview. Communication is the most important skill you can develop. It is a learnable skill. And even if we're fearful, I think this week Bruce Lipton gave us some great advice as how to deal with those fears and we can overcome them. And if you keep learning, you will learn to master your message so that you can inspire your audience every time you speak. Thanks for listening today. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Lots of love. Bye-bye. God bless.